If you want to see your name at the beginning of all of our videos, as well as see exclusive content here on the homestead, please feel free to join our Patreon. Memberships start off at just $1 a month. And as always, thank you for your support.
There are quite a few reasons we would want our animals to grow out faster. In the instance of our mini Rex, it would mean that when we put them on the show table at 3 to 4 months and they're filled in nicer, they have a better chance at placing in a junior show. And once they go up against other groups of rabbit in that breed, they have a chance of winning against seniors. Because sometimes when you have a really nicely filled out junior, they can beat a senior. It does happen, it's just not that often because a lot of times your juniors just don't have the filling out that they need along the top line. Now, for an instance of our meat rabbits, it's a bit different. We want them to grow in faster to hit that 5-pound mark so we can cull them as soon as possible to put them into the freezer. And the idea behind this is the faster that they grow out and the faster that they hit 5 pounds, the less feed that they use, the less cage space that they use, the less they cost in the long run. So for instance, if I can cull out a silver fox litter at 12 weeks versus 16 weeks, that's an entire month of feed and cage space that I don't have to put into that litter before I cull it out. So when it comes to our meat rabbits, it just has to do with cost ratios. Thing that isn't talked about a lot when it comes to raising rabbits is when to pull a nesting box on a mom that you suspect is pregnant. So for instance, I have Vanessa up here, I have Hawk underneath her. They're both expectant moms, normally who give birth on day 32 or 33. We are currently sitting on day 34. Which is not outside the realm of possibility when it comes to breeding your does or delayed implantation of a pregnancy. So the question therefore arrives, when do you feel comfortable to pull a nest out of a doe's cage? Now, I raise small to medium-sized breeds, and I myself feel comfortable pulling the nest box at day 42. Now, I've talked to Flemish breeders before and giant breeders before. They will hold out till about day 46 just because of the size and everything of the rabbit. I will say though, there is nothing worse than pulling a nest box early only to realize your doe was pregnant and she gave birth on the wire. Something I have heard of before is if you have a doe that you know is pregnant and she's taking her time and you're worried about the kits being too big, you can try breeding the doe to kind of kickstart the labor. Kind of like how when you're talking about humans and people are sick of being pregnant so they have sex to kind of speed things along. It's kind of the same idea when it comes to rabbits. Now, I personally don't like necessarily doing that, and what I do is I just rebreed around that day 42. But it is an option for you if you are worried about a doe going too long in her pregnancy. In our program, once a doe gets above a certain age to where either they aren't breeding anymore or they have a daughter that is out producing them, we generally cull them from our program. In cases like ours, that is a hard cull in which we butcher them out and eat them. Now, that doesn't have to be for every single program. Some programs soft cull. Soft culling can be anything from turning them into a pet or an animal that just stays within the barn but not the program. It could mean moving them on to a new home in the form of them being a pet or them being a show animal, like a senior show animal for somebody in 4-H and FFA if they are still show quality. But for us, generally, it just works better to hard cull them for the program and use them as food. Blue-eyed whites are a special kind of color that takes a special kind of genetics that is completely and utterly irritating to get down. You can get a blue-eyed white by, of course, breeding 2 blue-eyed whites together, and then 100% of the litter would be blue-eyed whites. You can breed a blue-eyed white and a Vienna carrier together, getting 75% of those kits, which would be blue-eyed whites, and 25%, which would be carriers of the Vienna gene. Or you can breed 2 Vienna carriers together and get a 50-50 shot. Now, if you're doing outcrossings where you take a blue-eyed white, breed it to a non-Vienna carrier, and then breed that Vienna carrier back to another Vienna carrier or another blue-eyed white, that's where things start to get complicated. Now, if you're asking what kind of colored genetics that I use as outcrossings, I use any kind of black-based animal. So in this case, I really like using black or broken blacks to breed into my blue-eyed whites. And then I've had some mild success with casters and broken casters. This is what a broken caster looks like. And then a broken black is just black and white. And the reason I like using brokens within my blue-eyed white program is because they hide Vienna marks very well and you can still use them in shows. But that can also be problematic because you can potentially hide that they're a Vienna carrier and ruin someone's lines. So if you are selling something that is a Vienna carrier or something that could potentially be a Vienna carrier, you want to be 100% transparent in that. So for instance, this little doe's mom is Sadie. Sadie is a Vienna carrier. One of the first breedings that I will do with this little doe is against another Vienna carrier or a blue-eyed white to see if she is a carrier herself. If she is, it's just something I mark on the pedigree, and then I could use her in my boo program. If she never produces a blue-eyed white out of those pairings and she isn't a Vienna carrier, then that's all fine and well too. But I won't be satisfied in marking her or her kits and such until we get 3 clear litters from her out of a Vienna carrier or a blue-eyed white. But yeah, when it comes to outcrosses, I really like black-based animals because if you use anything with dilute, you have a chance of getting a red reflect in their eyes, which can get you disqualified on the show table, and then you also have some issues when it comes to fur density and ranginess of the animal, which if you breed blue-eyed whites know is a pain in the butt already and is not helped when you breed in dilutes. The age we stop breeding our rabbits really depends on the rabbit. There are a bunch of factors that go into deciding whether or not you want to keep breeding a doe or if you want to remove her from the program. I've had does that could be bred 5-6 years old, but then I've also had does that at 3 years old they're done. A lot of that can do with body conformation or your lines, how heavily you breed in your program, and if the doe keeps condition or not after she has a litter. I decide to keep a brood doe, I'm guaranteed to have her for at least a year or 3 litters. That way I can kind of test her out to see what I like. And in that time frame, I will see if she produces a doe that I like better than her or if I want to continue breeding her. At the rate of having 3 to 4 litters a year, most of my does can last until 4 years of age. But then their litter sizes start to drop down or they have a replacement. An example of this is Sadie. Sadie is 2 years old, she's still giving me a lot of litters and she's doing fairly well as a mother. I've had about 4 different litters out of her, and her success rate at raising kits is around 90%. She's also been a great foster mom, and I'll continue to breed her in the program for a while. This is her daughter, which is 3 months old. I am growing her out right now to breed her. And she does have the potential of replacing her mother, but I'm not in a rush to cull Sadie and replace her with this doe until I know that this one does better. And the reason why I like this doe is she has the more correct color when it comes to her rufous. She has a much more compact body type, and she has a really great high point to depth ratio, even though her high point is slightly forward. So I'm holding on to this little doe to grow out and to have a few litters with before I make it official that I will replace her with Sadie. If I don't like what she produces compared to her mother, then I will cull her out, keep Sadie, or maybe I will keep one of these babies from this mama to replace her grandmother. So really, it's just a complicated answer. That depends on a lot of things being answered. My tips for a first-time breeder can just be a parrot of a lot of other breeders, or maybe I'll have something special to say. One of the biggest bits of advice that I can give is don't get too overwhelmed with numbers. Start small, a breeding pair or a breeding trio, and get used to the idea of having anywhere from 5 to 15 kits per litter. Rabbit math is very similar to chicken math in that it's really easy to get overwhelmed with the amount of animals that you have. Take your time, it's not a race, go at your own pace in learning this hobby. Learn your breed and learn your lines. I've known so many people new to the hobby that jump into it head first and they start off with 5 or 6 different lines. They want to try multiple breeds at the same time and they don't take time to learn how their animals grow out, how they fill in, and how the breed normally reacts. It's okay to not like the breed you currently have, just don't get 12 at once. I normally try out about 1 breed a year. And it takes me a good 2 years to decide if I like it or not. But my tried and true have always been mini Rex, and right now silver foxes are pretty close neck and neck with my Rex. I love those 3 breeds dearly, and the other breeds I've tried are okay, but I'm still learning some things about them. Champagnes. Know that there are going to be a lot of dead babies. Deaths in the nest box are quite common, especially if you are breeding dwarf breeds because of the double dwarf gene. Newborn kits die all the time for no reason whatsoever. I've had entire litters freeze overnight just because they are born on the wire or because mom doesn't pull enough fur and you don't get to them in time. It sucks, but it is a part of raising rabbits. Nothing is dead until it is warm and dead. If you find kits on the wire, throw them into your bra or go skin to skin with them, whatever you need to do to warm them up. A lot of times you can revive kits that way. Raise rabbits in a way that works for you. I'm constantly on here telling you about my favorite way to do things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for you. I've had solid bottom wooden hutches before. I've raised in a colony before. I have fed foraged food before. We've tried tractors. I don't like any of those things. But it doesn't mean that it's inherently bad or it won't work for you. So try a whole bunch of things. Find a community or friends who also raise rabbits. Support is always super important. And it's also a great way to learn more about the hobby. I have been asked about table breedings before when it comes to our rabbits, and I kind of have a good opportunity now to talk about it. There are a few kinds of different table breedings that you can do, and this is about what I do. Lizzie was getting a little too rough with Alpha in that she pulled a chunk of fur out of his butt, so I'm just kind of holding her still by covering her eyes. This allows Alpha the chance to mount without him having to worry about her biting him. Now, this is the kind of table breeding that I prefer to do, just where I cover the eyes and keep the doe's head around so that she can't go after the buck, but there are other ways that you can do it. You can do it in a neutral cage or on a table, hence the name table breeding, or do it on a stand or anything that is kind of waist level. And again, in this instance, I am just covering Lizzie's eyes and keeping her head forward so she doesn't bite my buck. The most that we breed within a year for a doe is about 4 litters a year. We have a very moderate breeding schedule, which makes it a lot easier on our does who are being bred to keep condition. So how that works is when the kits get to be 4 weeks that are currently on their mother nursing, that is the earliest we will rebreed a doe if her condition is correct. Most often than not, though, when it comes to our does, it's closer to the point that her current kits are 8 weeks that we will rebreed her. This litter right here that has been weaned out from their mom, all of my bucks, are currently 8 weeks. Here is the mom of that litter. She has 1 baby left with her because I'm still worried about weaning and mastitis, but I have still not rebred this doe. I might decide to rebreed her next week, but it all just depends on her body condition. More than anything, though, when it comes to rebreeding our animals, I want to make sure that our does are healthy and able to produce milk and take care of the litter that they are currently having. And to be honest, I think this is the doe that has the most litters out of this year. And she's only had 3. When it comes to our Rex, the dimensions that I like for our nest box are 1 foot by 2 foot. As you can see, Emma can sit in the front of the box with no problem without even being near her kits if she would want to. This allows for larger mamas to move around and do what they need to do, be it build their nest or to feed their kits, without necessarily needing to crush those kits. So if you see all that fluff in the back corner, that's just all of the babies. But out of the whole box, they might take up 6 square inches of space right now. If you're raising rabbits, you might have heard in instances where bucks spray or even does spray. This is what the back of my barn looks like right next to the buck stack. And if you look behind the buck stack, it's even worse. You could try getting something like urine guards, and that might help. With that being said, I have had bucks that purposely spray above the urine guards as well. You can make them out of plastic sheeting, you can buy them, whatever you want to do. It does work in some instances. With that being said, I just scrub this wall down on the back about once a week. White vinegar helps with the staining, as well as most of the smell. And then once a quarter or so, I just wipe down the entire barn with bleach. But in order to do that, I have to remove everyone out of the barn to give the wall time to dry. Here is the mostly dried wall. I still have to scrub a little more on this corner and closer to the floor to get those stains up. But for the most part, the stains come out with the first cleaning. The reason that we give the animals that we are going to eat names is just simply for identification reasons. It's easier for me to remember a named rabbit than it is for me to remember a sequence of ID letters and numbers. The same is true if my husband is watching after the rabbits and there's a problem. I don't think the man even knows that they have tattoos in their left ears after a certain age, and it's easier to say, hey, there's something wrong with Sadie, than to say there's something wrong with the rabbit in row 2, cage 1. Especially if I have to figure out if he means the same thing that I do in that instance. Same thing for if he says there's something wrong with the brown bunny. Do you know how many brown bunnies I have? It's quite a few. So by naming them, it's just another way to identify them. What really separates the emotions for me isn't if something has a name. For me, it's what their purpose is from the beginning. If I know from day 0 something is going to be eaten, even if it has a name, it'd be no different than if we were calling them by an identification number. Because their purpose is to feed our family, not to be a beloved pet.